so new to campus, and that is Pat Lynch. Pat is one of those rare folks who will outwork and outrun and out-enthusiasm almost anybody. And I have respected him from the first day that I met him when he interviewed for the job, and I've enjoyed getting to work with him and watch all the things that he's done for Lyon College. I have a pin for him that says, "You make a difference." So he is going to perhaps touch a little bit on one of those third rails today, but I'm sure, which is politics, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, but I'm sure he will do it with deftness and probably a little bit of humor. So Pat, take it away.
Well, thank you. Yeah, but thank you for your kind words. I know my parents always said I was special, and I thought it was good. All right, first thing, this work, I had help. And I always want to acknowledge people that helped me. First, Russ Pine. Russ is a student and helped me with a lot of the background research. And Russ is also our podcast producer at Kilt Studio. And I really benefited from it. Statistical analysis, questionnaire development, Brendan Connell, which I think he's streaming, so I'll wave to him. But Brendan just helped me format a questionnaire so I could get the answers that I was looking for. Full disclosure, I've been a whole career as a marketing practitioner, not as a marketing researcher. I love doing this, but it was one I need a little handholding. So Brendan was there, and Nisha Rao over here, she also joined in and helped me, in terms of putting all this together, so I owe a lot to them. All right, setting the stage. One thing in marketing that's a common thing is called just a brand restage. You come in, you assess a brand situation. It's not performing the way that shareholders want, that management wants. So you start to you look at, you put together all the data, and then you come up with an action plan. So here's a scenario. Here's a restaurant chain. They have a new CEO. They have a new chief marketing officer. And they're looking at all the systemic challenges that they have with their business. Aging customer base. So, that's just one, as far as that millennials, Gen X tend to spend more in terms of eating out than the older customer base. So they saw that this is something that's going to present a problem. They also looked at guest traffic was going down. People knew it, knew the chain. It's there, but there's so many other options out there because this is a real competitive space. So now, how do you get the traffic back up? And they just had an outdated image. It hadn't changed in a long time. And it's like, what do we do to get this modernized? Because people are attracted to things that are new. And so give me a reason why this is something that we want, that we want to now go to. So they hired a top brand strategy firm to help them put together the restage strategy. The firm is Profit. It's out of San Francisco. David Ocker is the CEO, and he is the flat-out expert in brand strategy. I have 4 books up in my office that are written by him, and he is really the go-to person for brand strategy. So it looks pretty good, doesn't it? You got this high-level consultancy that's going to help you. And what they recommended, modernize the restaurant experience. So stodgy, updated, all right? Refresh the menu and operations. People, I know what they offer, but I want to try something new. I want to, and so it's always there, but people just less and less went. And then start looking at loyalty programs, how you go in market, so that you don't stick with the traditional. Now, big secret lead in to who is this company, all right? Well, it happened to be Cracker Barrel, all right? And there's the old logo, new logo. old restaurant, new restaurant. There's all the menu items, which probably of all the controversy, the menu items were probably the least controversial. But, you know, people, well, what happened? They lost their minds, okay? So here it was that Cracker Barrel rebrand sparks political upset. The CEO, I feel like I got fired by America. So, you know, here it is. You had one of the top consultancies in brand strategy doing pretty much the classic marketing playbook. And then this is the results you got. So I saw this, and there were a couple other examples, and I thought, what's causing that? Because, you know, there's marketing people do dumb things. And don't look at me. Well, yeah, I've done some, but yeah, it's a case that, you know what, there's something more here, and that's what got me thinking about how do I go and do this research. So, you know, just looking at Cracker Barrel, to their credit, recognized that yeah, they touched the hot stove. They did a retreat. Sorry, go back to the old logo. Can't really go back to the change restaurants, but they're doing damage control. But, you know, they're still faced with declining declining chain traffic, and, you know, now they're really stuck. I don't know what's going to happen for them. Now, you know, this is kind of predictable. The end result, CEO gone. So took a year, but, you know, finally it was like, yeah, thank you. She's, what do they say? Spending more time with her family. So, so then, you know, this isn't just a Cracker Barrel thing. Bud Light, you know, trying to attract a younger target audience, aligns with Dylan Mulvaney, a transitioning man to woman. Cute ad, you know, just you know, it was like 15 seconds, and it really wasn't that well publicized. It got picked up by a few, and the internet lost its mind. Kid Rock got on YouTube and took a machine gun to a 6-pack of Bud Light. It was impressive, but yeah, you have things that, you know, they have brands that have to do things to kind of reverse kind of racist things. Aunt Jemima, or, you know, Washington Commanders, formerly the Washington Redskins, they hung on as long as they could, and then they finally had to walk away. And then on the other side, Target, who openly embraced LGBTQ and DEI, all of a sudden the political winds change, and now they're out and trying to come up, you know, trying to align themselves with what they think is a different cultural norm. None of that works. So something was going on here, and this is what's going to be the basis for my research. Now, I always want to come back to something like Cracker Barrel. I consider that a smart marketing decision. You know, here's clearly what the problems are. This was something that works for a lot of chains, but something culturally blew up. Because one thing for certain is that what you have is marketing people are still going to do dumb things. New Coke. Allbirds, yeah, my favorite. Colgate, the leader in dental hygiene. Why not lasagna? You know, come on. You know, and so this is things that this backlash that's been going on isn't dumb marketing decisions. It's something else. So this led to the whole brand evaluation research. And so if you could kind of tell me what is going on, that'd be great. So from this, I created a problem statement and a couple hypotheses that I wanted to test out. First, here's the problem is that, you know, polarization, you know, we're in a polarized country. And so, you know, what happens when brands start being perceived as taking different political or social positions? And then, you know, what it is that researchers lack kind of a real clear understanding of, is it politics or is it something else? Because right now, everything that I saw, it's all kind of lumped together. So that from that, you know, I looked at what could explain this is two ways. One is personal disposition, which is the values. these are I'm a traditionalist. I believe in these certain things. These are values core to me. Or the other is party membership. I am a Republican. I see that this is, as a Republican, this is how I see the world. This is how I evaluate brands. So values, political affiliation. And so then what I wanted to do was test the two. So first, the policies called dispositional alignment. Consumers with a strong personal preference for brands that align their political and social beliefs will evaluate politically visible brands more congruently, independent of partisan affiliation. So yeah, and I'll give a couple examples, but is it something that, just if it aligns, kind of, if it doesn't go out of alignment with what I have as far as my values, yeah, a brand may be affiliated by the outside with one party that's not mine, but I'm still going to be comfortable with it, because here's the thing, with brands, people buy brands not for what they do, but for what they mean. So when you buy a brand, you're making a statement about yourself. That's, so you have brands with, you got Nike and all the logos that they have on their gear. Here it is. And I always tell my students about brand meaning that, here's your 10-year high school reunion. Do you want to roll up in a janky Kia, or it's like a new BMW? Because then, hey, class, yeah, you frowned on me, but now I'm breaking necks, cashing checks. So, that's one that, brands, have a lot of meaning. So you look at, I'll pass this, great way to do this is what I call the Springsteen paradox. Okay? Bruce Springsteen, the boss. Everybody pretty well knows where he stands, as far as politics. He's a liberal, backs liberal causes, backs Democrats. But if you go to one of his sellout shows, will you see a whole lot of Republicans, conservatives, MAGA? Yeah, you will. And this is where Bruce and his politics is something that I can kind of match up, because it's not as important as what Bruce means as far as his music, the shared memories, because music a lot of times takes you back into something in the past that you connect with. And so he has this connection with an audience that, despite his open political beliefs, people are not going to walk away from them. So he can have a conservative and a liberal audience. And so is it his politics? No. His character? Yeah, because regardless of political affiliation, people see him as like blue collar, aesthetic, authentic, and kind of like an American in many ways. And so this can cross over. So first, you have this dispositional alignment. So people are evaluating brands based on, whether they match up with their values. Second is that I mentioned looking at the political identity. So consumers with different partisan identities, Democrat, Republican, Independent, they're going to look at, they're going to go and evaluate, is this a Republican brand? I'm a Democrat, I'm not going to buy it, and vice versa. So this was, so does this drive behavior? And the whole thing here is that people, politics in many ways in this country has become somewhat tribal. And so, I belong to this group. And so then belonging to this group, I am by reflex going to reject, what I see as being part of another group. So would that have an impact on brands? And so, here, what I looked at, as far as, does this work with a brand like Starbucks? Kind of, and I'll talk in a moment about brands that I evaluated in this research study. But Starbucks is, if you add, at least from the study, it's it's looked at as being more liberal leaning. You know, their hiring practices, kind of the causes that they support. But does that, you know, if you H2 hypothesis to political affiliation, if that's true, then you would never see a conservative in that coffee house. So that's where I wanted to test it. So the test, I ran a survey via Qualtrics and got 960 respondents, evenly distributed between independents, Republicans, and Democrats. So, you know, and this was geographically dispersed, so pretty good representation of different political beliefs. And so to test H1, H2, what I looked at was first, brand placement. How would you describe this brand politically? Do you see this brand as conservative, moderate, liberal, or just non-political? You know, it's so, you know, that, and so I kind of forced that. And then second is that a statement, I prefer brands that align with my political and social beliefs and avoid the brands that take positions I do not support. So, you know, would that explain Cracker Barrel? Would that explain the Bud Light controversy? So, the 20 brands I looked at was a cross section of a bunch of categories: technology, food and beverage, retail, automotive, apparel, and entertainment. So of course I'm going to throw Cracker Barrel and I'm going to throw Budweiser in there because, you know, there's been some politically polarizing things there, but I wanted to just see, you know, brands that, just from my own evaluation, seem a little neutral. You know, Ford, you know, people really just rated that more or less non-political, versus Tesla. And, you know, Tesla's kind of, the opinion on that's kind of changed as Elon Musk and his support of the Trump administration has had people start to rethink, you know, is this more of a political brand or not? Just did a, you know, regression analysis and then just looked at the group comparison to just see that what does this data show? Does it show that brands, you know, if they match up with people's values, that all of a sudden they're in alignment, or what is driving this? Is it political affiliation? Because again, why is it that smart people and the consultancy, they did this classic Cracker Barrel restage and it blew up? So what is it that happened? Now, in doing the research, full disclosure on AI usage, I use Claude, you know, for the statistical analysis. So and then I just ran it a couple times just to make sure that I have everything, that it all worked out. And then I just started to take the data and create it on my, as far as all the analysis and conclusions on my own. Now, what happened? H1, 20 out of 20 brands, complete alignment that supported hypotheses that what drives the people's evaluation of brands is whether or not they see that it matches their values. And so that was just across the board. The ones that just, you know, that across the board. And then if you look at this, there were some, in the case of Walmart or Chick-fil-A, Cracker Barrel, that was a very high alignment. Even the smallest one that was shown was Microsoft, more or less looked at as apolitical, but even there, it's still, as far as being tested, showed that it's statistically significant that hypothesis 1 is supported. Now, political affiliation, no, none, 0. Help me, is there any other ways to phrase that? But, okay, but you know, it turned out that, you know, it's that people recognize that a brand may have a political affiliation leaning one way or another, but it does not matter in terms of how they evaluate it. There are people that may have been vehemently opposed to Nike and their support of Colin Kaepernick. But, those people are buying Nike shoes. The ones that burned the Nike shoes were the ones that bought them for the first time, just so they could burn them. But for the most part, that this was something that, that it comes down to, where values is what seems to be driving how people evaluate brands. And this just shows, when you look at it, conservative to non-political, pretty much all the bars are even, so that everybody kind of saw it the same way. And so then this led to my conclusion that who you are matters far more than the political card that you carry. So, this is one that this is how people are going to look at it. This partisan group effect, seeing that it's a brand that's politically not affiliated with me, really does not impact their evaluation, which, and I'll get to a little later as far as the evaluation. The next important thing as marketing people is you always want to get the cash register to ring. So would that lead to sales from that group? Three things that, as far as marketing, that my advice to marketers coming out of the study is focus on values, not party. You don't need to, in your marketing research, do a lot of questions about what political party that they belong to. It really will not matter. What does matter is just if people see that your brand aligns with their values. So you want to find out what those values are and then find ways through your messaging to connect with them. And so this led me to kind of create a matrix where you have conservative, liberal placement, high alignment people, low alignment people. So, identify which part of the matrix your brand would fall, and then, just develop the appropriate strategy. So conservative, high alignment, what you want is just, you got to just stay true to yourself and not sit there and give any question, any reason that people are going to see you otherwise. That's in many ways what happened with Cracker Barrel, where people saw this as traditional. This is something I grew up with. Now they're walking away from this and becoming Chili's or one of these things. It just, it blew up. And then, yet with conservatives and low alignment, this is where, you just have to just stay, stick to the brand, avoid the politics. This is more or less that Springsteen paradox. So that, he can draw a bunch of conservatives into his fan base, and knowing what he represents. You got liberal placement, high alignment. These are going to be brands that, like Starbucks, Nike, Disney. They're not Nike. That's they never backed off from their support of Colin Kaepernick, and it had a very positive impact on their business because it connected via values with the core audience that they had. Disney, they've routinely been very supportive of the LGBTQ community. Florida decided that, they would oppose that. Well, they didn't back down, and it ended up working for them. Last, you just have a mainstream that's low alignment. And these are just, that brands that just stay out of it, just stay neutral, stay non-political. So what should brand managers do? Well, the whole thing, and I just keep coming back that party registration doesn't matter. What you really want is finding that way to align so that consumers personally, they just see that whatever the brand value you have is going to align with theirs. You're traditional, you're that you're fair, you do things ethically, whatever it is that there's this alignment that you have there. And just seeing that, this is Republican backlash. Remember that that was one of the headlines from Cracker Barrel, right? Political backlash. Oh, then what would you think? Oh, yeah, it was some talking heads on Fox News and OEN and Newsmax losing their minds. Well, they did, but the thing is that it really was something that went beyond that. That there was a bunch of people that just got bothered with them walking away from their kind of traditional positioning. That it was one that now why are they doing this? This is not the Cracker Barrel I love and everything. So looking at what I looked at for marketers in the future is really focus just on a simple question. I prefer brands that align with my political and social beliefs. Pretty straightforward, and so you don't need, and I mentioned this earlier, you don't need to focus on political affiliation. You don't need to focus on just do they identify one way or the other. That is not going to sway anything. And then just keep your message, consistent with your values. And I show as far as target here, $12.4 billion is an estimate in terms of the financial costs they had when they started, backing off of a very public position that they took, and people just now saw the Target brand is inauthentic. Not true. They'll go anywhere. So that's something to look at. Doing a broad, if you develop a brand strategy, for independence, that'll carry you forward when it comes to all of these different brands and different situations. So just focusing on the features, the benefit, the experiential benefits, all of those things are going to help. Now, future research, that the research from here shows that what's important is that I see this brand as aligning with my values. I mentioned earlier that marketing people, what we're brought in to do is to help the cash register ring. So where can I go from this? So what I was looking at is taking this a little further. Is how can I look at this in terms of this whole thing around value alignment, and start to look at how it impacts purchase intent and loyalty, because that's really the core of branding, is that how to build this business so that you can now you can get the revenue from it. Also want to look at there's different political signals as far as high alignment, low alignment. Based on the matrix, you pick a quadrant that you're in, and are you comfortable being in that quadrant? I didn't put any revenue numbers or anything to it, but is there a strategy that you can improve your business by being in one particular part of the matrix or not? Conclusion is that politically polarized consumers are not a monolith, and that individual disposition, not party membership, is what drives brand placement across the 20 brands. So you don't need a Democrat or Republican strategy. What you need is to find ways where people just identify, they can identify with your brand. And so this is just real straightforward. Kind of showed mistakes that marketing people do, and they, true to form, marketing people continue to do this. And just in the past week, I don't know if any of you saw Callaway Golf and Good Golf ran, and it's a new driver that Good Golf is going to feature. And they ran this ad where this guy sees a woman pulling out his driver, runs over and shoves her down. And so they did one thing. They united all political parties in hating the particular ad, and it just, was one that if you talk about something completely out of alignment, this was an execution. So with that, I'll just turn it over to any questions.
I got one for you, Dr.
Yes,
Lynch.
Enoch.
So, would a company ever do this just to publicize their name a little bit more, or would that just be like detrimental?
So repeat that?
If a company's seeing that like Cracker Barrel did this,
Right.
and then they bounced back stronger,
Mhm.
would another company do that in order to get publicity and like to get their name out there, or would that?
Yeah, I get, I don't know if setting yourself on fire to promote fire extinguishers would be a great idea. So, it's like, yeah, we blow the thing up so that now we can show that we come back. It's one of those, how people say you learn from your mistakes. Well, there's a school of thought that don't make a mistake, that's one. And I think the thing is that, that you just have to be a lot more culturally aware and research kind of changes that you're making to your brand so that you don't end up just having this surprise, the Bud Light, the Cracker Barrel, the Target, these are smart people, they're very experienced, and yet, they fell into this real quagmire. And, trying to get out of it is, then the damage is done. Bud Light, great example, #1 beer in this country until, the backlash from that Dylan Mulvaney tie-in, and now they gave the #1 position over to Modelo. And, what happens, especially leading brands, when a leading brand makes a misstep, and that is where competitors really get to come in and take over. And more often than not, the leading brand doesn't get back to that lead position because, that all of a sudden they've kind of reframed, reshaped, how their consumers are going to see them. And that core audience, in the case of like Bud Light, I've moved on. And so what have they done lately? They've done advertising with, Shane Gillis, Peyton Manning, all the tried and true things that you would think of for beer advertising. And they're recovering some of it, but again, they won't get that #1 position very easily.
I have a question.
Yes, Carol?
Well, I think one of the things that students you should take note of in the presentation is obviously they must have cut a few corners in their market research,
Mhm.
or they weren't targeting the right folks. So with their research,
Right.
And obviously brands that do not do their research or cut corners in their research are going to have situations like this happen.
Right.
And what do you see in terms of research and politics with the brands?
Well, the thing, sometimes a trap that marketers fall into is that it's kind of wishful thinking about what they want their brand to be. I'll give you an example in my past. Jergens lotion. Anyone remember Jergens lotion? It's it had this familiar cherry almond scent. The one problem was that cherry almond scent reminded you of grandma, and all of a sudden we're having a real tough time, attracting a younger demographic that would be prime users of the product. And we had all these strategies about what we wanted, what we wanted our customer to be, this, young, upscale, urban, female professional and all that. And guess what? It never was going to happen. And so what we found is that you had to take that core and then just kind of make minor changes around it. And there'd be literally, and there was literally no market research to support, this whole radical change. That somehow we're going to make this upscale. Brands make this mistake all the time about trying to, elevate the brand image, make it more upscale. And like my old boss used to say, the dogs aren't eating the dog food, so have to, really look at this. And so there's a research question. Like famous thing was new Coke. The thing was that blind taste test, everybody thought that the new formula was better. Problem was that nobody told them that, oh, by the way, your old Coke's going away. And then that changed everything completely. So research gap, did that kind of answer it?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially with New Coke, because it was, they were comparing it to Pepsi, and Pepsi always comes out on top in a taste test because it's just a little bit more sweet than regular Coke. And so they thought by making the product sweeter that they'd be able to pull over some of those Pepsi, drinkers, and it didn't work out. So, I remember that.
Yeah, to say the least, yeah. All right. Dr. Shulka.
I'm actually kind of going off of what Enoch said. So with the brands that you have in your sample, they're all very recognizable brands and probably top of the market.
Right.
So I wonder if the effects vary by initial market share.
Okay.
In other words, if you're like a very relatively unknown brand, creating controversy with politics can actually be like free advertising. Right.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if there's some kind of pattern in your results that relates to like how big of a brand you were to begin with.
Well, brand, as far as that like kind of disruption or controversy, that's like an upstart brand playbook, way to do that. It's just you have to tread carefully on what the controversy is. You could be edgy, but if people see you as racist, not too cool. So that may be, it's like, what is it that you're trying to do? The American Eagle. Do you remember American Eagle ran an ad with Sydney Sweeney, and it was just a play on words talking about good genes. And so, Sydney Sweeney, attractive young blonde, all of a sudden it's like, is American Eagle, kind of into eugenics and white supremacy, well, they got a lot of press. I don't think they sold any more American Eagle jeans as a result. So it's trying to create a controversy. It can work, but it's one of those high risk moves. That's at least my opinion. You agree?
I mean, I'd have to see the data. Like,
Of course you would. Yes.
you take the brands and
Of course.
rank them by initial market share, and then you check if the effects, there's a systematic difference.
Yeah. All
I
right.
have no idea.
Yes, ma'am.
So I think back about Coors beer, that was racial along
Right.
many, many moons ago. And pivoting when you make mistakes like that.
Yeah.
What are best practices, do you think, for pivoting when you do something, you do
Right.
release bad marketing?
The playbook, and this does work, is that you act immediately and you fully take accountability and say, yeah, we screwed up. And that Cracker Barrel statement, that's more or less what they did. The damage was done, but they did kind of avoid a real systemic departure from it, and that all these people just stopped going and they're going to go somewhere else. So it's that just you take accountability, just say, that we messed up, and then here's where we're going to go. Many times it goes back to a retreat, but sometimes they'll try and wait it out, rationalize it, and that as a strategy just doesn't work.
With that Goody, is that it?
Good golf, yeah.
So he was on the news this morning
Okay,
apologizing and saying, which really surprised me, the woman in the
Yeah.
ad is the one that's being attacked.
yeah,
He was not attacked,
right,
but the woman was.
yeah,
And so he said, attack me, I can take it, but don't attack her. It was my fault.
yeah.
So I was really shocked about the woman taking on, getting all of the heat for that.
And some of it they they didn't immediately just say, yeah, we just made such a horrible mistake in judgment. No coincidence that all these apologies started rolling out after Dick's Sporting Goods basically discontinued all Callaway products. Well, now all of a sudden, now now I see the light. It's like versus just acknowledging that, yeah, this is something that we just made a horrible mistake and move on, and that happens. Do you remember the controversy years ago with Peloton, and they had the husband gives the wife Peloton, and then and basically it was just all her trying to please him, and it kind of it really was kind of tone deaf, and it blew up completely in their face. And now the one thing was that the woman in that ad, Ryan Reynolds, I forget his
Like
He-
Lively,
what?
like Lively.
No, he has like a vodka brand or
Oh, the vodka, yeah.
yeah, he had, and he used her as a spot, like when you get all of a sudden when you face some of this, what you really need is a nice drink, and so he had a way to play off of that it was kind of interesting. So there's somebody making good on a controversy, but they did it in a playful way.
Dr. Squatch did it with Sydney Sweeney, with the baby
Yes,
water ad.
yes, yeah.
$8 bar of soap.
Gotta love marketing. Yeah, okay. All right. Yes, Pete? Oh,
He's first, I think.
all right. Karanga.
So now in terms of given the personal preference or personal value
Yeah.
determines the most. So if I think about the new company or the new brand,
Mhm.
right? So let's say my target audience is 1 million. Let's say my target audience is 1 billion.
Yeah.
So as much as among all those target audiences, our common goals, common value things, as much as they can be diverging, they also can be converging. So if I have a new company, if it is converging, right, if I can find common 5 goals or 5 valuable things, then I can kind of target my strategies. Given modern day, everything doesn't seem to be converging, everything is diverging because I need this space, I value this, I value this. So then how I would strategize in terms of getting my brand name across these divergence audience?
Well, in branding, one thing I preach in my classes is that, for lack of exact number, 320 million people in the United States. Your brand will not appeal to all of them. And so what's that mean? Now your process is to find who is that target audience? Who is it that is going to, love what we do, connect with our product, buy our product, stay loyal to that product. And so you go through a whole set of steps and segmenting your audience, finding of all those segments, what is the target? What are all the different what's the right age, the demographic, the different demographics, psychographics, and now you have that. And what you're trying to do is to segmentation strategy to make it effective is that that particular group of people will respond similarly to a brand message. So you won't will it be a monolith? No, people are complicated and they all have different things, but the more effective your segmentation strategy, you're going to be able to get those people and understand exactly what they need so that you don't fall out of alignment with them. That answer it? Sort of?
Because I mean, so much, the brand is so much, right? My
Yeah,
so
but
then how?
but
It's a difficult question. I don't know.
brand.
So you're never going to appeal to everybody.
Yes.
That's the
Of
key.
course, yeah.
You're never going to appeal to everybody. So you get your target audience or your target market, and you figure out what that demographic is and what that cultural segment is and how large that's going to be.
Come on down here. You can help me. You can help me out.
And so and
Yes.
culture largely can help you overcome minor differences in value, and that's what you see in some of the, and Starbucks and Bruce Springsteen. And so Bruce Springsteen's a cultural piece. It's culture. He appeals to a wide variety of people, but largely to more of a blue collar audience and more of a working class audience in general, or someone who has originally come from that background. Maybe that's what they were when they were kids, or they were teenagers, and now they're not anymore.
Right.
And so, but that cultural significance overrides the minor value differences amongst it, so that you can do that. And that's what brands can do too. I would say that Chick-fil-A and Coca-Cola and several others, there's really, it's going to be tough to find a brand that's going to be broadly appealing to everybody. So you figure out what your market is. You want the biggest market possible. I mean, I would assume, and you go, okay, what's the biggest possible cultural market that I can hit? And that's what you go for.
Yeah, because the absolute worst place to be in marketing is being a Me Too brand, where you really, and Me Too brands, what they end up that way because they don't have a point of difference. They don't have, people have a tough time separating them from others. And Me Too brands try to appeal to the broadest possible audience, and it ends up being a failed strategy, because Me Too brands, what happens is that they arrive at one point of difference, and that's price. And so then, in order, if people see you as the same as all the others, the one differentiation that you can do is to lower the price. That works temporarily until one of your competitors matches you. And then now you're in a price war, and your business starts to, really have an impact. So that's just something that,
It's a race to the bottom.
yes, and what you want, branding is all about finding that point of difference. Yeah, because why should I buy you versus all the other things that are out there? And if you can answer that question successfully for a meaningful number of people, you have a business. Peter, you had a question?
Yeah, so during your research, did you come across any indication that the people or the companies or the brands that took a position that you could call it a value position, but
Yes.
a lot of values do have a strong correlation with political identity as well. But
Right.
did they do that, I guess, sincerely, in that was what the top management believed in, or did they do it more cynically in that they thought they would capture more market share by taking that kind of a stand?
Yes. Some of it is, it can be a cynical play, but then, people will see through that eventually. There's like that whole area of authenticity. So if you're now, trying to position yourself, and a lot of times CEOs fall in this, where you're a social justice warrior, but then all of a sudden your business starts to tank, and you realize that, you have to pivot another way. That people start seeing that as that there's a level of phoniness. The backlash right now in Silicon Valley, where a lot of these the tech CEOs, they all came in to try to align themselves with the Trump administration, because they just saw it as a responsible thing to do for their business and shareholders. But, it does come at a cost, in terms of, just how people are going to look at them. And it really is going to be a couple years from now in terms of just, how you evaluate those, those brands, those businesses, and we'll see where it goes from there.
So, as a follow-up question, then,
Yes.
a deliberate strategy of neutrality be the best way to go?
Well, you don't need to be.
Political-
Well, you don't need to be. Yeah, neutrality is a good thing. A great quote, Michael Jordan. Anyone remember this?
Broken by shoes too.
Yeah, exactly. And he took a lot of heat, but that is the way to do that. Why? Michael Jordan's Michael Jordan. He's one of the biggest names out there, but he didn't see himself as a political actor. I am like one of the greatest athletes ever, and his relationship with Nike's just been insanely successful. But yeah, he didn't need to see that, and it served him well. He took some initial backlash, but it really didn't hurt the Jordan brand long term. And so taking a neutral point of view, yeah, I think sometimes brands steer into political positions because of the CEO and their particular preferences, and that can come with risk, because things, the wind shift, and now you're on the wrong side.
I think that.
You stretching, or do you have a question, Enoch?
I think a lot of the brands that I've seen that have not done well have been ones that didn't really understand, or had a CEO or leadership that didn't really understand what a brand, meant, and didn't understand that it's something that creates an emotion or evokes feelings in people,
Right.
It's not the product itself. Does that make sense? And so, I think that's a bigger question that we need to be asking people. Do you really understand what your brand is? As Lyon College, do we understand what our brand is here? Do we not, do we just produce a product? Our students, do we just, have a product of classes that we teach here or services that we offer?
Yeah.
So, it's really more nebulous, I guess.
Oh, yeah, well, I saw Kurt raised up. One last answer. Here's a great example. Southwest Airlines, transparency. We love our customers. No baggage fees, no pre-assigned seats, low cost, high quality experience. And then the business stalls and the financial people take over. What do?
Seats get smaller.
Assigned seats, baggage fees, and all of a sudden they are no different than Delta, American, and United. And so that is just that's what happens if you don't understand what your brand means. I did an example in class today about CarMax, the way car buying should be. Nobody likes buying a car. They always feel they're getting the raw end of the deal. Some new marketing person comes in, and now it's want to drive. I want to have them go back to their old positioning. So this kind of stuff happens all the time. We out of time, Kurt? Or did you have? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. More questions? Yeah, Yes, Atlas, Senator Wilbanks.
Excuse me. You sort of made the distinction between the political statement or taking a political side and just having values.
Yes.
And you said that there are some companies that are very neutral in the politics side.
Mhm.
Are there companies that are making it to the top of the pile and being values neutral, not saying that we care about anything in particular? Is that just companies don't
I
make
think
it?
value neutral is a tough one. Yeah, I think they all care about something. There's something about the brand, but the point is that just trying to align yourself with are you going to focus on whether people consider you aligned with conservatives, liberals, moderates? That's really not going to be important. What is important to consumers? It's this whole thing around like the brands and how they align. And fact is that a lot of this, as far as this research, this is kind of a first step for me in terms of just where can I go to take this? Because I think this, like a lot of research projects, starts to raise a lot more questions in terms of things that I can follow, which is what I plan to do. That answer?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good deal. Well, I will wrap this up at this point and say thank you all for coming out for the first one. I appreciate the questions, and I appreciate you all taking time to come see me.